All right, grab a snack because this story spans from late 2019 to last week, and I'm about to give you the scoop. First things first, I want to make sure you know that all the names I'm using here are fake. So here's the background. My soon to be ex wife, let's call her Sue, and I were high school sweethearts. We started dating in 1992 when we were both 17. We're both 45 now, and stayed together ever since. We got married at 22, shortly after college, and had two boys, who are now 22 and 17 years old. I dedicated 23 years of my life to her, built her a house, and worked hard to provide the life she wanted. Sure, like any couple, we had our ups and downs, but we always managed to work through them. That's why discovering her affair hit me so hard. Now let's go back to March 2020. That's when I first started feeling that something was off. For about 2 months before that, we were in a bit of a rut. I was recovering from knee surgery. I tore my ACL in the fall of 2019, and my mobility was limited. My knee had only about 55% range of motion at the time, which meant I couldn't do a lot of the usual household chores. I was on workers' comp because I got injured at work, so I couldn't do my usual tasks around the house. My sons helped where they could, but some things only I could handle, and my wife wasn't happy about doing them. Plus, our intimate life had slowed down even before my injury, but during this period, it completely stopped. Around this time, Sue started spending more time hanging out with coworkers after work, which I thought was fine. I'd never had a reason to doubt her in the 23 years we'd been together. We both had our friends, and that was never an issue. But in January of that year, I noticed something strange. Sue started acting distant towards me. She stopped giving me the usual hugs and kisses. Her phone, which she used to share things she found on the internet with me, became off limits. She even became snippy in our interactions, as if she couldn't be bothered with me. Now fast forward to March, and the COVID-19 pandemic hits, leading to a lockdown in New York City. Both of our jobs were considered essential, so we didn't have to work from home. I had recently been cleared to return to work after 5 months of being unable to move much due to my knee surgery. I was excited to get back to physical activities because I'm into martial arts and hit the gym regularly, aside from doing home projects. Within a week or two of the lockdown, Sue informed me that she would have to put in extra hours. Initially, I didn't think much of it due to her line of work. I assumed it would be an occasional thing, but it turned out to be a daily occurrence, and she'd come home hours later than usual, head straight to the shower, spend some time with me and our 17-year-old son, and then go to bed. As I recovered and became more self-sufficient with my knee, our intimacy slowly returned, but she seemed mentally and emotionally distant during those moments. It became evident that something was seriously wrong by early April. All the signs were pointing towards her having an affair, so I decided I needed to find proof. I started my investigation by looking at her social media profiles. Up until a few months prior, her posts were pretty typical. Pictures of us, our sons, her friends, and a few snapshots from her nights out with coworkers. However, one thing caught my eye. There was a guy who appeared in many of these pictures, always standing very close to her. He had his arm around her shoulder or his hand on her lower back, which was way too intimate for someone I had never met personally. That definitely raised some suspicions. But the real bombshell was the fact that this guy was her Facebook friend and followed her on Instagram. So I decided to check out his Facebook profile, and guess what? I was blocked from seeing his account, even though he was friends with my wife on Facebook. That raised even more red flags. At this point, I wasn't denying it anymore. I knew she was cheating on me with this guy, and my mission became finding out how long it had been going on. So over the course of April and May, that's exactly what I did. I discovered something surprising during my investigation. We had a family plan for our cell phones, and I realized I could access a lot of data. When I checked my soon-to-be ex-wife's, I'll call her Sue, data history from October 2019 to April 2020, I noticed two frequently contacted numbers. One was mine, and the other was from a number I didn't recognize. Can you guess whose number it was? I did a quick Google search, and it turned out to be the guy from the photos who had blocked me on Facebook. Let's call him POS. Now, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. However, many of their messages and texts were missing, which meant she was deleting them. I knew she was cheating, but I needed more concrete evidence. That's when I confided in my best friend, Oz, about what I had found. He asked if I had confronted her, but I hadn't because I felt it wasn't enough proof. Oz then introduced me to an app that allowed me to spy on her communications in real time. I won't mention the app's name to stay within the rules. I installed it, synced it with our data plan, and waited. Within days, I saw it. A text conversation between them discussing how much fun they had the previous night and making plans to meet up again on the weekend. It was like a punch to the gut, and I was utterly devastated. For the next 2 days, I distanced myself from her. She noticed and tried to console me, but I couldn't stand being near her. This was the woman I had devoted 23 years of my life to, and she had cheated on me with a guy just 5 years older than our eldest son. By the third day, I wasn't even sad anymore. I was furious. I contacted Oz to confirm my suspicions, and he asked if I had confronted her yet. My answer was no, and I told him I wanted revenge. I didn't just want a divorce, I wanted to shatter her life and leave it in ruins. I planned to make her existence miserable while secretly working on my escape plan. In my research on infidelity, I came across a quote that stuck with me. The enemy of infidelity is unpredictability. That became the foundation of my plan. I aimed to make her life chaotic while carefully plotting my exit. We were now in early June, and I still had the app installed. Every night, I gathered their messages, even though I couldn't bear to read them. I just collected and cataloged everything on my private server. Meanwhile, I started behaving unusually. I went out at odd times, returned home later than she did, and spent more time on my phone when she was around. Whenever she asked what I was doing, I simply replied with "just stuff" and put my phone away. I also changed the login information for all my accounts to prevent her from accessing them. Throughout our entire marriage, we had never hidden anything from each other. However, around the time I suspected her affair began, she changed her passwords on Facebook and her phone, claiming it was due to security breaches. It was a convenient cover for hiding her affair from me. I shared my plan with Oz and informed my older sister and 2 of my closest friends, people I trust with my life, and I swore them to secrecy. Oz and I had been friends since childhood, so I knew I could count on him. Now let me tell you about our friends Joey and Nina, whom we've known since high school. I should mention Nana because she becomes important later in the story. As July rolled around, my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXDO, was getting increasingly paranoid. She began texting and calling me more frequently, asking about my whereabouts and what I was up to. It was clear that the seed of suspicion had taken root in her mind, especially in her conversations with POS, the guy she was having an affair with. She confided in him about her doubts, telling him that I seemed distant and cold. Can you believe it? She even suggested they should stop meeting up at our house because she was worried I might unexpectedly show up. This confirmed that she had indeed invited him into our home. Thanks, Sue. In one of their conversations, POS asked her if she was concerned that I might be cheating on her, which actually angered her. I couldn't help but find it amusing, my cheating wife arguing with her affair partner over whether I might be unfaithful. The irony was not lost on me. Now, it's important to note that I wasn't actually involved with anyone else. When I left the house, I would typically hang out with my friends Oz and Joey, watching fights and spending time together, or I'd be at my big sister's house with her and my brother-in-law. My sister is 52, and her husband is 58. She had informed him about my STBXDO's infidelity, but hadn't shared the details of my plan, as he tended to be a bit of a gossip. Let's fast forward to October when things really started heating up. I had been in my pretend affair for 3 months by then, and Sue was becoming acutely aware that I was growing more distant from her. It had been the same number of days since I initiated my plan that she confronted me, which happened on October 20th, 2020. I was half expecting her to confess her infidelity, but of course she didn't. Instead, she asked if I was unhappy with her. Can you believe it? She pointed out that I had been spending too much time away from home, wasn't showing her affection anymore, and our sex life had dwindled. She even asked if I was cheating on her. I couldn't contain my laughter. I laughed so hard I fell on the floor and kept laughing for what seemed like an eternity. To her, it seemed like I was laughing off the idea of being unfaithful, but in reality, I was laughing at the incredible irony of the situation. I eventually composed myself, kissed her on the head, and went about my evening. Later that night in my office, I decided to see what she was saying to POS. I fired up the app and found that they were texting in real time. She told POS that she believed I was cheating on her and that I had laughed when she asked. She thought I didn't care about her anymore. This brought a big grin to my face. She was breaking down. POS tried to console her by saying that if I truly cared for her, she wouldn't have to seek comfort elsewhere. However, her responses indicated she was having doubts. She had the audacity to step out of our marriage because I couldn't fulfill my husband role due to a legitimate injury, and she had kept the affair going for nearly a year. But the thought of losing me to another woman made her waver. What a weakling. During all of this, I was also executing the second part of my plan for payback, getting my financial affairs in order. In September, I consulted a family attorney to initiate the divorce process, armed with a mountain of evidence of Sue's infidelity. New York is an at-fault state for divorce, and the overwhelming proof I had gathered could be used against her. My lawyer advised me to organize my finances for potential asset division, but I went a step further. I secretly moved all my money from our joint account to my personal one. I also began searching for an apartment as part of Phase 2. Now, in November, my behavior remained unchanged. In fact, I intensified my actions. This is where my friend Nina comes into play. You should know that Nina and Sue have never been close. I've known Nina since my freshman year of high school, 2 years before I met Sue. Sue had always seen Nina as a threat because she's my closest female friend. There was always an unspoken, I don't trust her vibe from Sue when it came to Nina. Conversely, Nina was never a fan of Sue. Early in my relationship with Sue, Nina pointed out how Sue was trying to insert herself into our circle of friends, which irked Nina. Sue's circle of friends had no males except for POS, whereas Nina was the only girl in my group. Nina had been stuck overseas due to the virus, but finally returned to NYC on November 3rd. To celebrate her return, Oz, Joey, and I decided to have a dinner and drinks night at Joey's house. There were only 5 of us: Oz, Joey, Joey's wife, who was also Nina's sister, Nina, and me. Continuing our story, Nina, being quite clever, came up with a plan to mess with Sue's head. She suggested we take some photos in a similar style to the ones I had found of Sue with POS a few months earlier, and then post them on my Facebook. So that's exactly what we did. It wasn't until the 5th that Sue caught wind of it. Some of our friends noticed my posts and how close I seemed to be with Nina. This really messed with her mind because she still believed I was cheating, even though Nina had been stuck in Europe for most of the year. But that didn't stop her from trying to confront me that night about being too touchy in the photos. I saw this as a perfect chance to deliver a critical blow. I responded, "So what about the photos of you and POS from last year? He was quite affectionate in them. Did you see me getting upset about it?" She was stunned. It was the first time I even mentioned POS's name throughout this ordeal. Her mind was racing as she tried to explain those photos, which she didn't even know I had seen, considering how infrequently I used Facebook. When I did post something, it was a notable event, which is why the photos with Nina garnered so much attention among our circles. She tried to explain it away, saying things like, "He's like that with everyone. He's just really friendly, and I can see how it looks, but there's nothing there." She even offered to delete the pictures, but those weren't what hurt me. What hurt me was her year-long affair while lying to me about working extra hours and spending time with friends. But as Lieutenant Commander Worf from Star Trek, The Next Generation famously said, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." From that night on, Sue became extra clingy and attentive to me, which became quite annoying. She would try to initiate affection and intimacy, but I would avoid her every chance I got. Meanwhile, I continued archiving everything she was saying to POS. By this point, I had become emotionally numb. Any desire I might have had to save our marriage had long disappeared when I initiated the first phase of my plan. She started confiding in POS about how I had become worse, how she didn't know what to do, and how she felt like I despised her, which I did. Then came the bombshell. She said she couldn't see him anymore. The guilt was overwhelming, and she felt like karma was smothering her. She couldn't risk losing me. She admitted that she loved POS deeply but was still in love with me, and she needed to save our marriage before losing me. Unfortunately for her, it was about 8 months too late for that. POS reacted by saying lovely things like, "He doesn't love you the way I love you, and you're making a mistake. You can't just discard me like this." That text exchange would be the last they had until about 3 weeks ago. Throughout November into December, Sue was in limbo. She was trying to gauge where my mind was and still couldn't tell if I was actually being unfaithful. Meanwhile, POS continued to blow up her phone daily, but she ignored his messages. I noticed her checking her phone often and quickly putting it away. Meanwhile, phase 2 of my plan was now officially complete. The divorce papers were ready, and I had signed a 2-year lease for a studio apartment in Co-op City. New Yorkers will know the area. All my money was safely in my personal account, and I was ready to make my move. Now let's talk about Thanksgiving. My oldest son and his girlfriend were hosting a small gathering for our immediate families. It included my oldest, his girlfriend, her parents, she's an only child, myself, Sue, and our youngest. We had a fantastic evening, and my oldest's girlfriend, who was studying to be a chef, prepared all the food herself. She's an incredible cook, I must say. To maintain the appearance that everything was fine between Sue and me, I initiated affection with her several times during the evening. I gave her kisses on the cheek, cute hugs, and even wrapped my arms around her shoulders from behind. She noticed and seemed to revel in it. Keep in mind that this was the first time I had touched her in nearly 2 months. Since that night, she confronted me in October. I won't lie, it felt repulsive to do it. But I had to keep up appearances for my plan. Being distant in front of my boys, my oldest's girlfriend, and her parents could raise suspicions. So my youngest son decided to spend the night at his big brother's place, and Sue and I headed home. During the drive, she thanked me for being so good to her and said, "I don't know what you're going through, baby, but I'm here for you." I had to hold back my maniacal laughter again and replied, "I know. I just need some time." For the first time since spring, we had sex that night. I figured, why not? With what I was about to do, I might as well get some action before I removed her from my life. I won't go into detail, but it wasn't a romantic encounter. Afterward, she lay there like a lump, trying to comprehend what had just happened. There was no cuddling or anything. I had bigger plans in motion. Continuing the story, I woke up, took a shower, and then went to sleep in my office. To her surprise, I used a condom that night, which was the first time I had done so in 2 decades. She was puzzled by it, but she didn't ask any questions. I sure as hell wasn't going to risk going without protection, given that she had been doing so with POS for months at that point. The next day, I checked my spy app, and for the first time in weeks, she responded to POS. He went all out with a lengthy message, professing his love for her. He said she was wasting her time trying to rekindle a flame with me that had died. He claimed she had been in a prison with me for 23 years and deserved a man who would cherish her. Keep in mind, this guy was 27 years old, 5 years older than our oldest son, and he was head over heels for a 45-year-old married mother of 2. What a grade A, high-quality simp. She responded with a similar message to what she had said before. She loved him, enjoyed their time together, but couldn't risk losing me. She still considered me the love of her life, but she'd always have a place for him in her heart. She offered to remain friends, but their physical relationship was over. He begged her to see him one last time that week, and as you might guess, she agreed. One more rendezvous, right? Who was I to say anything, considering what I had done the previous night? Of course, I added all of this to the archive I had compiled. On December 4th, Phase 3, the final phase of Operation Shinobi Ghost, began. The divorce papers were ready, and my new place of residence was set up. Now I had to start slowly moving my belongings out of the house. But first, I had to break the news to my sons. I called my oldest son over to the house that Friday night and had both of my boys join me in my office. I didn't go into specifics, but I told them that their mother had been cheating on me for over a year, and I would be filing for divorce soon. My 17-year-old was especially affected by this news, as he had recently experienced his first taste of infidelity when his first girlfriend cheated on him just 4 months earlier. Witnessing his heartbreak for a second time, this time from his own mother's actions, hit him hard. My oldest son took the news better and suggested that he would take his younger brother to live with him until things settled down, to which I agreed. We packed up some of his stuff, and he asked me if I would be okay. I reassured him, saying, "Yes, son, I'm going to be all right. And so are you. We're going to be all right. I promise." Then they left, and the hardest part was behind me. It was now time to execute the final phase. Over the next few weeks, Oz helped me move my most sensitive belongings out of the house bit by bit. I had given him a list of items to grab while Sue and I were at work, and I left him a spare key. These were things that Sue wouldn't notice were missing unless someone pointed it out to her. I also got a new phone and phone number and shared my new contact information with everyone who needed to know: Oz, Joey, Nina, my boys, my big sister, and my mother. Meanwhile, I continued with the charade with Sue to keep her off the trail. There was still some emotional connection between her and POS, but it wasn't as intense as before. During this time, I collected every bit of data I had archived since I started the plan, including call logs, texts, pictures, emails, and everything else. I made printouts and organized them in chronological order, from the beginning of the affair until the last bit 2 weeks ago, on December 16th. I had a total of 14 binders filled with evidence. I wrapped each binder, placed them in boxes, and gift-wrapped them with different recipients in mind. My father passed away 7 years ago, her parents, her 2 sisters, her brother, her HR department. I forgot to mention that POS worked for the same company, and there were strict rules against intercompany relationships due to the nature of her job. Several of her friends, POS, and POS's parents all received these boxes. I shipped them all out on December 16th, with an estimated delivery date between December 22nd and 24th, just in time for Christmas. Now let's fast forward to Christmas Eve. Sue came home around her usual time, and I had no idea if she had seen POS or not, as I had stopped tracking her on the app on the 18th. I figured I had gathered enough information from it. As usual, she took a shower, spent some time with me, and we even had sex on the living room couch. Yes, I know, I'm a complete jerk. Then she turned in for the night. The final phase was upon me at last. In the middle of the night, I woke up, wrapped one of the 3 remaining binders with the divorce papers taped inside the cover, and left it on my side of the bed with a note that said, "Merry Christmas." Next to it, I left my old phone and a business card from my lawyer. I packed the rest of my essential items, enough to fill 2 backpacks, and I left my home, the home I had spent 23 years in, for the last time. That, my friends, was 1 week ago. To Sue, I am now completely off the grid. I've disappeared, gone completely silent. She's blocked on Facebook, but for some reason, she hasn't blocked me yet, so I'm keeping an eye on the fallout. It's absolutely glorious. The packages I sent have reached everyone I intended, and Sue is facing severe backlash. Her youngest sister scolded her, both of her parents condemned her, and my mother tore her apart with words. It was brutal. She's been frantically trying to find out if anyone knows my whereabouts, but those who do aren't saying a word. Her Facebook feed is filled with desperate attempts to reach me, likely because she knows I'm likely watching. But I won't say a word to her without my lawyer present. She has no way to spin the narrative to make me the bad guy because I've exposed her to everyone who matters to her. And from what a mutual friend who works at the same company as her told me, both she and POS are apparently being placed on administrative leave as of tomorrow. So chances are, She'll be entering 2021 unemployed. As for the final two binders, one has been handed over to my lawyer as my final piece of evidence for the impending divorce, and the last one is in my storage unit, waiting to be burned in Joey's fire pit when the divorce is final. Do I feel guilty about all of this? Not one bit, not even the slightest. I have been a devoted husband for 23 years, giving her the home, family, and life she wanted. I loved her unconditionally, never faltering, straying, or even considering breaking our vows. Whenever there was an issue in our marriage, I came to her, and we worked it out together. Instead of coming to me and expressing her dissatisfaction with our sex life at the time, she chose to find comfort in another man's bed. She decided to step out with a young guy who gave her the excitement she was craving. So to be clear, I have no remorse for my actions or any sympathy for her.